When I was 11, my family went camping in a remote area deep in the forest. It was a large campsite, and we set up 2 tents and an RV. My family and our dogs slept in one tent, my friends and their parents in another, and my grandparents and cousins in the RV. There was only one other RV and a tent a few rows down, so we had plenty of space, with our tent closest to the woods. One night, around 3 a.m., I couldn't sleep and needed to use the bathroom. Too scared to go alone, I woke my dad, who promised to watch from the tent window. I grabbed a lamp and went to the toilet tent, turning off the light inside to avoid attracting bugs. Moments later, our usually quiet dogs started barking and growling aggressively. My dad yelled for them to be quiet, but they only got louder. Curious and frightened, I peeked out of the tent. I saw a large figure with long arms, a snout, and antlers walking smoothly past the tree line. Its eyes glowed red from the reflection of a nearby RV's light. My dad opened the tent to let the dogs inside, and the creature turned away, disappearing into the woods. The dogs calmed down immediately, but it took me a while to feel safe enough to return to the tent. In the morning, I told everyone what I had seen, but no one believed me. My grandpa said I was probably just tired and mistook a deer for something else. Later, my cousins and I found hoof prints and drag marks and a tree with fresh, deep scratches where I saw the creature. Grandpa dismissed it as deer activity. Determined to find more evidence, we ventured deeper into the woods with my grandpa. We found more marked trees and a dead fox with a large portion of its side ripped off. Grandpa suggested a coyote might be responsible, but he seemed disturbed. After that, I refused to sleep in the tent and stayed in the RV for the rest of the trip. We never returned to that campsite, especially after a couple was found dead there 3 weeks later. Camping alone in Northeast Ohio, I was on my 3rd and final night. It was a serene and quiet evening, with the sounds of the forest lulling me into a deep sleep. Around midnight, nature called, and I woke up to relieve myself. As I walked about 10 feet from my hammock, a headlamp flickered in the distance, roughly 8,100 feet away. Intrigued and cautious, I watched the light for about 10 minutes. The figure with the headlamp stood up, then sat back down, repeating the motion as if waiting for something. My curiosity turned to concern. I quickly put on my boots, grabbed my hatchet, and decided to investigate. Moving silently to the right of my campsite, I aimed to circle around and approach from an angle. I had covered about 50 yards when I noticed another headlamp, much closer, only about 40 feet away. This new figure was walking around, searching for something. I dropped to the ground, covering myself with leaves to blend into the forest floor. The man walked just 10 feet from where I lay hidden. He stopped, lit a cigarette, and finished his beer, tossing the can carelessly on the ground. My heart pounded as I waited for him to move on. When he finally did, I silently rose and continued toward the first man. As I approached, I heard the faint sound of his phone receiving messages. Creeping closer, I could see his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. Suddenly, he stood up and began walking toward my hammock. I lay on the ground, watching as he approached my campsite. I followed him back, moving slowly and quietly. When I heard the sound of my tarp being trashed, my stomach churned. Flashlights flickered, and I saw the beam of my own large flashlight being turned on and off. They were rummaging through my belongings, muttering about how he was just here. From my hidden spot on the ground, I watched as they continued to destroy my campsite. They threw my mess kit around, stomped on it, and scattered its contents. My hammock and tarp were shredded by what looked like machete cuts. I lay there helpless until they finally left. The light from my flashlight became a distant, dim glow as they walked away. When the first light of dawn broke, I returned to my campsite. It was a disaster. My hammock and tarp were in tatters, my mess kit was crushed, and my backpack, rain gear, and flashlight were gone. Surveying the damage, I felt a mix of anger and relief that I hadn't been discovered. I went to the spot where I had first seen the man with the headlamp. There I found chew pouches, 8 empty beer cans, and an empty lighter. I moved to the area where the second man had been. The ground was littered with cigarette butts, an empty bag of meth powder, and a pile of human waste with no toilet paper in sight. Exhausted and shaken, I packed up what little remained and left the campsite. The forest, which had seemed so welcoming and peaceful, now felt ominous and threatening. The memory of that night would stay with me forever, a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk in the dark, even in the most tranquil of places. Back in 2021, my husband and I decided to camp at Boysen Reservoir in Wyoming. We managed to book a beachfront site, which seemed like a dream come true. However, the site was very isolated, far from other campsites. At the time, the isolation seemed appealing, offering us privacy and a direct view of the water. Wyoming's desolate landscape meant that once the sun set, it was pitch black and eerily silent. We set up camp, enjoyed a cozy fire, and reveled in the tranquility. As night fell, the silence became almost oppressive, broken only by the crackling of our fire. Suddenly, a random SUV with blacked-out windows drove down our road and into our sight. The vehicle moved slowly, its presence jarring in the stillness. My husband waved at them, thinking they might be lost and in need of help. They ignored us, driving down to the beach, where they lingered for about 5 minutes before turning around and heading back up the way they came. An unsettling feeling washed over us. The SUV's behavior was too strange to ignore. My husband told me to pack everything up quickly, while he kept shining a flashlight toward the beach, suspecting someone might have been dropped off to watch us. We hurriedly threw our gear into the car, adrenaline surging. As we were about to leave, the same SUV reappeared, driving back into our campsite. When they saw us leaving, they started chasing us. The narrow, bumpy roads of Wyoming's wilderness were treacherous, especially at high speeds, and enormous wildlife often wandered onto the streets. "I have to go fast. Are you okay with that?" my husband asked, his voice tense but controlled. "Just go and get us out of here," I replied, my heart pounding. We tore down the winding roads at 80 miles per hour, navigating through a canyon with the SUV hot on our tail. The chase lasted for about 10 minutes, each second stretching into an eternity. Finally, we lost them after passing through the canyon. The most terrifying experience of our lives, we think about it to this day and wonder what could have happened if we hadn't listened to our gut at that moment. As we drove away, the reality of our isolation struck us hard. The beauty of the Wyoming wilderness now seemed fraught with hidden dangers, and the silence that once promised peace now echoed with the memory of our fear.